Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to the Prophetic Mentality podcast. This is part 2 of our 2-part series with Shaykh Mustafa Umar. If you've not already gone through part 1, then I highly suggest you hit pause and go back to listen to part 1 before you go any further. Now, if you've already listened to part 1, then you already know why you're here. I won't keep you waiting, so Assalamu alaikum and enjoy part 2.
Alhamdulillah, yeah, things are going good. The reason we wanted to bring you on was to talk about masculinity.
Yeah.
We know there was a seminar that happened in SoCal. This was, I think, middle to late of 2019, right? There was a seminar. Was it a seminar or
the reclaiming masculinity?
the reclaiming?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, masculinity.
I forgot when it was, but yeah, about a year or two ago.
Yeah, about a year or two ago, something like that. And we wanted to kind of pull a little bit of that information and talk about that topic in general.
Sure.
I mean, I've said this before on the podcast, but the main reason I started this was due to my own confusions when I was getting married.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe it's because I didn't have too many examples in my life of what a man is supposed to be. I have my father, but you only interact with your family for so long. There's social media, there's entertainment. I'm spent majority of my time here in America growing up. So, and you're constantly learning and trying to adapt your thinking to whatever is modern and whatever people are telling you. So, all that stuff converges when I'm trying to get married, and all of a sudden I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Yep.
Yep. So as a Muslim, what does it mean to be a man? Let's just start. That's a basic question.
Before we actually start, do you need a break?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Do you need a break?
Oh, that's just making sure.
Okay, we're good. I think everyone's good.
Alhamdulillah. So what does it mean to be a man? It's a general question.
Very general question.
Okay. So the thing is, this idea. Okay, so biologically, we understand the difference between man and woman. Okay, everyone understands that part. This idea.
Can we hammer in that point just for today's audience?
Sure. So let me.
I'm not even joking. I'm saying there biologically there is.
Okay.
You can play with gender, whatever, all you want, but.
So let me tell you with my background growing up, right? My understanding of gender before I was kind of practicing Muslim, my general understanding was kind of leaning towards almost like radical communist type of understanding, where there's only physical differences between male and female, but that's where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is just a pure social construct. Okay, so I think, and that was in the 90s when I was growing up. I think that's kind of becoming a much more common philosophy among people, is that their understanding generally is male and female, they have different bodies. Men have a penis, women have breasts, things like that. We have that understanding, a difference in hair, difference in, amount of body fat and things like that.
Musculature, broad shoulder, small waist, that kind of.
Exactly. So the physical parts, but outside of that, everything else is just a social construct. And all of that needs to be deconstructed. So the role of man in society, the stereotypes of, crying like a woman,
toughen up like a man.
Every single notion, from men being in the military, from women being football players and construction workers and everything. Basically, anything that a man can do, a woman should be able to do, and vice versa. And these social roles have been enforced upon us through just these oppressive cultures, right? So that's kind of been my understanding growing up, at least conceptually. Well, if it's not practically. So the issue becomes, is this a correct understanding? And what really clicked for me in my understanding of Islam was two things. Number one is that from a purely scientific perspective, yes, we got all the physical differences, but then there are psychological differences. And if you have psychological differences which are grounded in biological differences, you have a very strong foundation that there's more than just physical differences. So what I mean by that, like for example, testosterone, okay? Guys have a different level of testosterone. What effect does that have on their psyche, on the way that they process things? There is objective research to show that the amount of testosterone that the average male is going to have is not something that's influenced by society. It's not a cultural influence. It's something that's built into people, right? So if that's built into people, that means there's a physical difference and there's a psychological difference. If there's a psychological difference, what role or what effect is that going to play in society? Now the whole argument of nature versus nurture, you have this nature part being made as well. So when you understand that, coming from an Islamic perspective, what does Islam say about all of this? Islam differentiates between males and females in many rules across the board. There's no spiritual differentiation, which is the most important aspect, right? So if a man does a good deed, a woman does a good deed, they're on the same level. Man does a bad deed, a sin, a woman does a sin, they're on the same level. There's not like, men's good deeds will be multiplied, or women's bad deeds will be multiplied, or something like that. There's no concept like that. That's the equality, or part of gender equality, spiritual gender equality. But beyond that, if you look at the rules and you kind of deduce certain wisdoms, you see that there's a difference in where men and women are standing in prayer. There's a difference in women not praying during their menstruation. There's a difference in the inheritance amount that's being given. There's a difference in when they're getting married, who has the right to unequivocally or single-handedly pronounce divorce. There's a difference in who has to give mahar to the other person, dowry to the other person. So you look at everywhere across the spectrum, there's a difference between men and women. There's difference in the way that they're supposed to dress. The Prophet, peace be upon him, cursed people who try to imitate the other gender in their dress. So you look at all of these things and you're like, well, wait a minute. These are clear-cut rules from an Islamic perspective. These were not contextual to only the time, right? And if they're not contextual to only the time, what is the underlying rationality or rational basis behind it? It's pretty simple. It's not just that they're physically different. The psychological differences, which are proven now, manifest themselves in differences in the way in which they're going to be acting, the type of maybe role that they're going to be playing. And that's really important for people to understand, because they're trying to redefine this idea of gender roles. What is a male role in society? What is a male role versus a woman's role in marriage? And again, these roles can somehow be adjusted, depending on the society in which you live, but there are constants. And the constants in Islam, because of the rules in Islam, it locks certain things down and says, here are the constants that should not change. And from those constants, we derive certain principles. And from science, we understand the same thing. We realize certain constants of, certain kind of chemical difference between the two is going to lead to a different behavior. It's very solid research on that. Those are constants we can build on. That's like the foundation of understanding masculinity or femininity in society.
And what's interesting, so like fiqh-wise, Islamic law-wise, what if I'm the exception to the rule? What if I can drink my body? I had some weird gene. I could drink alcohol and never get drunk.
Yes, exactly.
So can I start drinking alcohol?
So the thing is, exceptions don't make the rule.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. So that's the thing. So yeah, there will be people who are exceptions. And it's not like Islam didn't know this, right? Muslim scholars had dealt with
hermaphrodites.
They call it hermaphrodites now. That's a politically incorrect term.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. You don't know. It's in the
I'm
books
not woke enough.
Yeah.
Wait. What happens if you have both genitalia? What's that?
You've used the wrong term. So what happened? Hermaphrodites is a category. It's like a genus that encompasses plants as well. So what you're doing is you're talking about human beings, and you are actually using a term which is even used for non-humans. Therefore, you're dehumanizing the person who has both.
I apologize.
So, just cross that out. So the correct term now is intersex.
Oh, intersex.
Yes, that's LGBTIQ and all the other letters that come later. That's the I. It's either inquiring or intersex. There's different.
That's why it's
Muslims.
I squared.
Yeah, exactly. There's different schools of thought. So it depends. So the Q can also be questioning.
The four madhab.
Yeah, so they have different opinions within the.
Okay. That's the Salaf and Fasiqeen.
You guys you've not gone into the details.
Oh, wait, I thought. Okay, because this stuff is all over my newsfeed because
your algorithms are messed up.
My algorithm's all messed up on Facebook, and I thought I knew, but I just learned something today. Subhanallah.
So Muslims have known about this idea of khuntha. Okay, translated as hermaphrodites, but it's supposed to be translated now as intersex. Right?
So Ali radiallahu anhu was approached, right? And they asked him, like, we have a child that has both genitalia, what do we do? Do we put him with the men or women? And he said, how does he use the bathroom, or how does the child use the bathroom? And the more dominant one is the
exactly. So, but their understanding of gender was binary, right? And there's like this fight against this non-binary gender and all that stuff.
Unlimited genders.
And unlimited gender, exactly. So the idea of binary gender was you have to assign this child to be one of the genders because it has to be one of the two. And if we're wrong in our decision, then when it starts growing up and we see different characteristics, we'll assign it back to the other gender, whichever one is supposed to be. We could be wrong in our assignment, but there's only two gender options, right? So that part was clear. Yeah.
But nowadays
it's not clear anymore.
It's not clear anymore.
Nothing's clear because you're allowed to invent any gender you want. So gender.
So you're saying you can deconstruct it, but up to a certain point, up to like the core principles, right? Maybe you can deconstruct whatever your society imposed.
You mean in terms of masculinity?
In terms of masculinity and gender.
In terms of roles and all that? Yeah. So exactly. You can
every culture has its own understanding.
Exactly. Every culture has its own understanding. Maybe women wear hats in some society and men wear hats in another society. It's going to be different. Men wear earrings in one society, women wear earrings in a different society. Right?
Maybe male aggression has a different connotation to it in some society.
Exactly.
And that you can deconstruct that.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, a man is supposed to be, you could say, the provider, the caretaker, the protector, whatever it is, right?
Exactly. So there's certain constants that are there that are prescribed in Islam,
mm-hmm.
and then those constants have a backing rationally within our understanding of what human beings are. Right?
So what are some of those principles, those core tenets? Islamic ones. Okay. Yeah, from an Islamic perspective, that's what we're trying to focus on.
Okay. So from an Islamic perspective,
let's keep it like colloquial level. This is like for the average college student. It's like, what am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to be as a person?
Okay.
Right.
So let's say in terms of marriage. Let's start with marriage.
Sure.
Okay. So when someone gets married, the man is supposed to be the provider of the family. He's financially responsible for taking care of his family, including his wife and his kids. Right, so now what you have is very common to have what's called egalitarian marriage, where basically everything's supposed to be split 50-50. That means that husband and wife both work, husband and wife both take care of the kids equally, husband and wife both cook equally. It never works out that way, but that's the ideal conception of marriage, which means that they both earn independently and they both spend on the house independently, right? But in Islam, it's not that way. So even if a wife is working, man is still financially responsible for her. Because he's financially responsible for her, there's going to be other things that accrue. There's going to be a different sense of responsibility, different rights and responsibilities within the marriage in terms of being in charge of the household, in terms of making certain decisions that's for the security and the protection of the household.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of when he's inheriting, he's going to inherit a different amount than his sister's going to be inheriting.
Because he's still responsible for possibly his mother or his sisters as well. And his own family, whereas his sister gets married, she's going to be taken care of. Yeah.
So she's not financially responsible. So she's still getting money, but she doesn't need to spend that money on anyone else besides herself, right? Yeah. So when you look at Islam as the whole system, it kind of puts these things into context.
Yeah.
So can I ask you a practical? I heard this one once at one of the TR Tajid retreats.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really good question. Actually, one of the cabin leaders is asking it, right?
Okay.
He says, because they're talking about, it was like the men's only Q&A. Mm-hmm. So we live in a society today where some women are going to make more than men, as much as men, right?
Yes.
Which wasn't as common maybe even just one generation ago.
Yep.
So he's looking, at the time he was looking to get married. He said, look, I'm talking to some women. And the thing is, they're working, they're making a good amount of money. And then she's like, okay, we're going to get married, but you're going to take care of all the expenses and all that. And on top of that, you're going to pay me my gift.
Yep.
And on top of that, you're going to take care of all the household expenses. And I'm going to work the full time too, though. You can't make me stop working. Even if you say like, oh, I want to start a family, I want you to stay full time at home with the kids. She said, no, but I'm going to make my money, and my money is my money, and your money is my money. And that's the kind of life I want to live, so to speak. So we live in a society now and we talked about this offline, being pushed of, they call it utilitarianism. Yeah. Your worth is what you make. Mm-hmm. And some women, unfortunately, are falling into that, where the worth of motherhood is being diminished rapidly. Yep. Fertility rates are dropping, marriage rates are dropping. So can you speak to, this is the modern context. So a man's looking for a woman and he finds she's an educated woman. There's nothing wrong with that. But how should they approach these new dynamics that we have today?
Yeah, that's the thing. When it comes to family, okay, Islam encourages family. Okay, there's an encouragement of having children. It's not a requirement, but there's an encouragement. The Prophet, peace be upon him, talked about, in a nutshell, he's basically saying that, I'm going to be proud of my ummah on the Day of Judgment when there's more people. So, have more children. This is a good thing. So people who can do it, great. And if you're having kids, you want them to be raised properly. You want them to be raised in a good manner. That requires time. It requires investment. So this model that the person is asking about or is proposing, or is kind of like the new trend. So, I'm going to keep my money. You keep your money. You're going to give me the gift. You're going to support the family. And I don't want to have any family. I don't want to have any kids or anything like that. This idea of, well, that's going to maximize my self-worth. There's two problems with that. Problem number one is you're not helping with the, continuation of the human race or spreading of the ummah, right? Number one. And number two, there's good research to show that there's an innate desire, particularly in women, to be that nurturing mother, to be caring, and then there's a time in their life where it clicks, and then they're like, I feel my biological clock is ticking and stuff like that. So that innate nature is in line with the fitrah, or the natural disposition. That's something that oftentimes, if this becomes a trend in society, again, exceptions are exceptions, but this becomes a trend, people are going against their natural disposition. All right, there's good research on it. Many people say that they feel it. They want to be able to raise a child or something like that, and going against that is going to be harmful to society. Not only is it going to be harmful to society, it's going to be harmful to that woman as well, down the line, or at least to most of them, right?
Maybe going against your fitrah is never going to pay off.
It's never going to pay off. And the thing is, there'll be a feeling of accomplishment for that particular person, maybe for a period of time. But the vast majority of people who go down that route, the accomplishment of material accomplishments is not going to be long lasting, right? So that's a very materialistic view of, and that's kind of the problem with the way our society is shifting. Women are viewing that men have traditionally had the power and the money in a monopoly over power and money.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the patriarchal society.
Yeah.
And somehow there's like this idea is that there's this underlying agenda to ensure that it stays in the hands of men and it can never be in the hands of women. So part of the feminist movement, second wave and now third wave feminism, has been to acknowledge that there's this patriarchy that exists, and we have to override this patriarchy because it's unjust, and we need to replace it with something else where women can get access to money and power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this notion needs to be deconstructed. It needs to be understood that from the Islamic philosophical perspective, is money and power the highest level of achievement that someone should aim for, number one. And number two, if money and power is not that, is there anything equivalent or equitable to money and power that women can strive for that has a similar value like money or power, right? And what Islam says is, yes, there is something, right? There is that nurture, there is that care, there is that raising of a generation, there is that emotional aspect of life, there is the social connections that women can have that men cannot have. So while they can also share in some aspects of money and power, right, that is not a goal to say these things are not the things that women generally throughout most universal cultures have inclined towards or focused on. These have no real value. Only these things that men have had have value. So we need to try and shift over here and be in the role here in order to get access to this, and we can kind of push men as much as possible back over here. Well, there's some overlap, right? But then there's some separation as well. And I think this is a big mistake that people are making, and it's exactly what you're talking about. Is this desire of money and power are the most important thing.
I think it's power. Power is the power structure.
The money leads to power.
The money leads to
Yeah,
power.
right.
Yeah.
And you have rights with it.
And
right?
I think this is all a reaction. It's a reaction to abuse of power, right?
So I would say that it's the man's
abuse of power.
Man's abuse of power, losing their responsibility, not being who they should be.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have had these issues to begin with.
Exactly. So
this doesn't come out of nowhere.
Exactly. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It doesn't come out of a vacuum.
Yeah.
There's some legitimacy in the response, but when the response becomes so extreme, that you generalize and you say this entire thing is a patriarchy. We need to fight the patriarchy.
All men are
All men across the board, or the system of the men across the board, and you define it as a systematic, type of oppression, like this Michel Foucault type of, system structure, power structure of oppression. This idea becomes very problematic, and it puts men and women, at conflict with each other. And it's not going to create a balanced society. So that narrative needs to kind of be there needs to be an alternative to that narrative.
And I don't think the men who internalize that worldview, they're not attractive to women. Because they end up being very passive. They don't have any self-assurance. They're not very confident in themselves.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, if this is something actually I heard from a matchmaker. They said, a lot of these women who are feminist, or they're very like into their career, or they're very strong in their person. I don't remember the exact words the person used, but when they're looking for a man to marry, they want someone who's actually one step above them in that regard. Like they don't want someone who's soft and let them do whatever they want. They end up not being satisfied in that kind of relationship, even though they have that super strong feminist mentality.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really sad because we also spoke about this. There should be value in a woman getting her education, college degree, all that good stuff. And then we should, as a society, we have to push it too. And the men have to value it and say, an educated woman raising my children is worth a ton to me, more than you making money. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, dual income, bro. That's what I heard a lot of guys would tell me. Dual income, can't wait.
That's it.
Like, yeah, but when you have that kid, you're gonna have a conflict if you guys didn't discuss it beforehand. Like, oh, you have to drop your career now. That thing where like dual income, no more dual income. And we've been living on dual income standards, and now we have to drop our standards, and just a lot of things can fall apart after that.
Huge problem. Yeah, I mean, this dual income idea is what's happening in California. Majority of families are dual income.
Yeah. To live here, it's difficult not to.
But the reason why is because the rent is so high in California is because of the dual income, right? So people don't realize that. Most people have dual income, so now they can afford this type of rent. The people who don't have dual income, guess what? They're like, oh, well, my rent, my salary is going to be much lower. So that brings the housing prices much higher.
I mean, that is an economical argument, but if you were to say something like that nowadays in the blogosphere, that would be very problematic.
Why would it be problematic?
Because
you're blaming women.
You're essentially saying that if women just didn't work, lives would, things would be cheaper. That's.
I mean, in the blogosphere, you're gonna get crazy.
And you know who actually made that argument before you?
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, she made a similar argument.
Okay.
So that's you're safe, but.
Someone had mentioned it to me, right? And when I first heard it, I'm like, that's that sounds very problematic. And then I just sat and thought about it, and he explained it, and I'm like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying it has to be the ideal situation. I'm saying if this is the ideal model, right? If this becomes the ideal, two things are going to happen. Number one, if they're having kids, assuming they're having kids, I mean, advanced countries like Scandinavia, Japan, they have very, very low birth rates. People cannot even get married. They're not having kids.
The death rate is higher than the birth rate.
Yeah, declining population.
Yeah.
Major declining population, right? Yeah. But let's say they have kids. With dual income, how much nurture is there going to be for the kids, and what's going to happen to the next generation? So I mean, there is this concept, there's a concept of division of labor. Okay, there can be overlapping of labor like there is in any company, but there's a concept of division of labor in every company, in every field of life. So, and that's considered to be something which is beneficial for that structure. It's the same way in marriage. It's always been the same way in marriage. But what's happened is with this idea of egalitarian marriage, because women have access to jobs. I'm not saying they shouldn't. It's good that they have access to jobs. But there has to be a division of labor after a certain period, usually when kids come into play, right? And if kids don't come into play, that's okay,
all day,
great.
yeah.
You just both keep working, and
no one's affected. That's why.
No one's going to be affected. Exactly. So there's no big deal. So the assumption of the egalitarian marriage is kids are taken care of somehow.
Which is now the
state. Taken care of by the state, taken care of by the public school. The argument only works when you don't factor in the rest of the family.
Yeah.
When you factor in the rest of the family, argument breaks down completely. And what's the cause? What's one of the biggest causes of breakdown of society? It's breakdown of family, right? Well, people who don't even have like conservative family values or whatever you want to label it, they still understand that family problems are family problems, right? Like it results in major issues within a society.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. That's why that division of labor is there, and that's why that division of responsibility and rights are also there, built into Islam, because it fits into the natural paradigm. Everyone understood this. Most societies in the entire world understood what we're saying without even saying it. It's just recently there's this notion has changed because women have much more access to labor employment opportunities and jobs and education and stuff like that. And that access is not the problem. It's the career part that becomes the problem if family is going to be involved. Right? So the answer the answer is, well, everyone's equal across the board. Everyone should have the same rights and responsibilities across the board. Everyone should sacrifice equally across the board. Now, what is that really going to look like? Does that look like, okay, guy's going to go to work one day and woman stays at home with the kids. The next day, he stays at home. She's going to go to work. He stays, You've never seen that environment. That doesn't exist, right? So there's a hypothetical that people are saying would be the ideal, but that ideal really doesn't exist. It's not practical, and when people think about it, they know it's not practical. It's only practical when there's no children and no family involved.
Yeah.
And when I talk to people about like pre-marriage things, and they say, "Oh, what should I ask potential spouse?" You got to ask a question about kids. No one asks those questions. They say, "Am I compatible with this person?"
Yep.
Okay, you probably are, probably not. You can figure that out pretty quickly. But you got to ask, when we have a child, let's say 5 years, if you don't want to think about it now. 5 years from now, we have a child.
Yep.
Are you going to stay home with a child? If that's what you want, if that's what you value as a man, you have to ask that question today, not in 5 years, and then get pissed off, and we have an issue.
And that's a requirement. So I won't even perform a marriage without one premarital consultation. And I don't have that much time to invest in it, so I just do 20 minutes. And one of the questions is, have you talked about children, right? And what is it going to look like when you have children? And you'd be surprised. Most of the people who come in, they're like, I'm sure we'll agree on that. I'm like, no, you're gonna agree on it like right now. You need to discuss it now because you never thought about it. And when they start talking about it, they're like, the guy's like, I'm okay with taking care of the kids a little bit and stuff like that. And she's like, yeah, see, he's okay. I'm like, no, how is it really gonna be when you're in your career? Are you gonna pause your career? Is he gonna pause his career? Are you just both gonna keep working? And who's gonna do what? And most of the time they have no understanding. And I give them a scenario. So what would happen in this scenario? And then all of a sudden you see like major conflict. And they're like, well, I thought you'd be okay with this. I thought you wouldn't say something like this, And then you realize, wow, they didn't even think about it. It didn't even dawn on them. And this is one of the major causes of marital problems today.
Even when you want kids, I have a friend. He thought I guess they had spoken about it, right? Like, oh, she wanted kids late. What's funny? The woman wants kids later, not the guy. And it's been, I think they've almost been married 2 years. He's like, man, I really want a kid, but she wants to finish XYZ school and then use it for a while. She told me like 3 years from now. It's like 3 years. That's crazy. It's already been 2 years. I can't wait that long, right? And because he thought he could convince her or like she would change later, but you gotta like.
This is very common. The thing is, most people who come in for a premarital consultation, they'll come after the engagement, after they're romantically involved already. And the thing is that's too late because what you're gonna do,
that's the Western model.
That's the Western.
They
model.
moved in together. And
No, without even moving in. Just basically, if you're in love already. And now
I'll do anything for you, honey.
That's exactly what happens. They're like, women's like, I really don't want to have children. It's like, I'm like, are you okay with that? Like the guy, are you okay with that? It's like, I guess I would be okay with that. I think that would be okay. And he goes, yeah, I talked to him. He said he's okay with it. And I'm like, are you really okay with that? And the thing is, let's just say he's 19 and he's okay with it.
He doesn't know.
When he's 22, or when he's 25, when he's 33. He may not be okay with it, right? So what's going to happen in that case? Now you're going to have major setup for marital conflict, right? Yeah. So that's this idea. If this is not taught, and it's not being taught, if it's not taught, it's not discussed, what people's trends are, people are going to continue to have major family issues, and divorce rate will increase. Forget divorce rate. Family conflict rate is going to continue to increase. And that's not good for society at all.
So on the masculinity side of things, a man is a provider.
Man is the provider.
The caretaker, right? He's supposed to, essentially pay for everything, cover his children, his wife.
Pay for everything. They go out for dinner. Who's going to handle the check?
It's obviously
it's going to be the guy.
Yeah.
A lot of non-Muslim they split the check or something like
yeah.
that. No, this guy's going to take care of it. Car breaks down at 11 p.m. on the way back from a party, okay? And kids are in the back seat. Cell phone doesn't work.
Who's going out of the car?
Who's going to walk to the call box?
It's the man.
That's it.
When something happens in the middle of the night and you got to go outside to check it out.
Who's going to do that?
It's the man.
It's going to be the man. So it does. That's the expectation. Now, again, exceptions can be exceptions. Some women, I know some women will come along.
Or black belts.
I'm a black belt. I'm tougher than him. I could do like a taekwondo kick. I could take this guy down. Okay, you probably can. Maybe you're an exception to the rule. You want to volunteer to go down? That's fine. You can do that.
Because at the end of the day, you're volunteering to go down, possibly go down.
Exactly. So what is by mutual consent? So
Can we take a pause? Because I think both cameras just went out.
Absolutely.
Bismillah. Let's just take a 5 minute.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Sorry for that little intermission. We had some technical difficulties because, mashallah, this podcast is going on longer than we planned.
Alhamdulillah.
Where did we leave off?
So he was talking about roles, and I want to ask Shaykh Mustafa this question. So a lot of times when they talk about roles in the household, they like to bring up the example of the Prophet ﷺ, which is a good thing, virtuous. You want to bring up the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Right. And they say, well, the Prophet ﷺ, he always used to cook his own meals. He used to mend his own clothing. He used to give me a household chore. He did it. And it's anti-Islam not to do these things.
Yeah.
So you've heard these arguments. And yes. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's cringeworthy, unfortunately, because what it is, it's taking the entire hadith completely out of context. And this is actually very dangerous, because what you're doing is, when you take a hadith out of context, you are almost telling a lie against the Prophet ﷺ. This is a very, very serious thing. So the context of that hadith is really to indicate to people that the Prophet ﷺ did not think that any type of task was below him. Okay, you have to understand, he's a leader. He's a political leader. Political leaders, presidents and stuff, they have guards at their door.
They have cooks.
They have cooks. Yeah. They have people. The average common people cannot meet them. They don't do menial tasks, small little things and stuff like that. It feels beneath their dignity. Mm-hmm. So when this hadith is being reported, they're clarifying that the Prophet ﷺ was not an arrogant person. He was so humble that even though he's the Prophet, even though he's the head of state, even though he's a kind of political leader or king or whatever you want to call him, it was not beneath his dignity to do these type of tasks sometimes, once in a while, right? So yeah, he could potentially cook a meal. He could potentially, sew his own clothes or mend his own, garment or something like that. This hadith does not mean that on a daily basis, on a regular basis, he's doing all these household functions. Because if he's doing all these household functions, there's two problems. Number one, how does he do them when he's not even in Medina most of the time? Right? He's somewhere else, right? So he's going to be doing all of this when he's not even at home, first of all. Second problem with the argument is that if he's doing all of this, what are his wives doing then? Because people quote this in the context that, well, men should be doing this too, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, did this. So if the Prophet did this, and he did battle, and he did teaching, and he did, all the other things that he did, what exactly is the role of the wives? When people put that in there, they have nothing left. And sometimes I've actually heard, some teachers, Islamic teachers, saying, yeah, the woman is like a princess. And she gets the life. Wouldn't you want the life of a princess? And it's like, that's the way we make dawah to people. Mm-hmm. We tell them that if you become Muslim, or the beauty of Islam is that a woman gets to be the princess who doesn't have any responsibilities. And I'm just like, look, I understand the dawah motive, but that is very disingenuous. That is not an accurate representation of how the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were, first of all, nor is it an accurate representation of how the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was. So the context would be, look, if a guy has to do some of these things sometimes, it shouldn't be beneath his dignity to do it when there's a need for it. This doesn't mean that he plays that role and he plays every other role as well. That doesn't make sense. So it's like when the Prophet ﷺ is picking up bricks to help build the masjid, right? That doesn't mean that's his role now. Like he's a construction worker.
He's a builder.
He's a builder.
Yeah.
You know, he used to do. He used to lead the Muslim community, and he used to be in the masjid, and he used to do judgments between people, and he used to lead the army. And when it was time to build a masjid, he would go and build the masjid himself. No, it didn't mean that. It means that he didn't think it was beneath him to go and pick up a few bricks once in a while. Doesn't mean that he's constructing all the masjids himself. It's very important to have that context, because what people are doing is, and I know I know why it's happening. They already have
It's a reaction.
They have a picture. They have it's a reaction,
Yeah.
and they have a picture of what they're trying to achieve. They're just trying to show that, you know, oh, there's this machismo, there's this hyper masculinity, this toxic masculinity where guys feel it's like beneath their dignity to do anything, and we need to respond to that, right? So the response is, well, the Prophet ﷺ used to do all these things. When people understand that, oftentimes their context is, oh yeah, well, guys should be, you know, it's used as a justification for this egalitarian type of marriage or relationship where guys are doing all this thing. That is a wrong justification. That is not an accurate way to represent what the real message of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was.
Yeah, so I'm going to play off of that. It definitely is a reaction, right? You have, Islam oppresses women. Islam does this to women. It subjugates women to the man and all this stuff. And then you reactionary pull out these hadiths and you're like, oh no, the Prophet did this, the Prophet did that. You know, the woman is treated like a princess and all this stuff. And it's, you're both wrong in the sense. No one is being subjugated.
Yep.
The man has responsibilities as well. The woman has responsibilities.
Yep.
It's like, how do you kind of capture control of that narrative? And then you kind of have to, what am I looking for here? Kind of fix your worldview a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I used to be that person. Okay, I used to throw out those hadith and be like, you know what, we gotta defend Islam against the attacks.
Yeah.
You know, of Islam oppresses women and this and that. It's like this is the ammunition that we have to work with.
Yeah.
Just throw it out there, and because the two biggest attacks against Islam historically for like the last 50 years have been how Islam treats women, how Islam deals with violence, right? Like warfare and all that stuff. Anything we can throw out about peace, anything we can throw out about women getting some kind of potential benefit, we just throw it out, whatever we have there. And again, like you said, it doesn't create a balanced narrative. So how do we rebalance that narrative?
Yeah.
It's to have a comprehensive understanding of what an Islamic lifestyle is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Right? So you go back and you zoom the camera out. And you say, okay, I'm looking at the Prophet, peace be upon him. He's doing these things. Now let me zoom out. How often is he doing these things?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Could he possibly have been doing this throughout his entire life? No, it can't be the case. Are other men doing the exact same thing? No, it's not the case. Is he warning other people that, hey, you should be doing something like this? Did he make it into a sunnah? This is what you should be doing. No, it's not the case. How do you balance it? You look at all different aspects of Islam, of how people used to live, what teachings of Islam generally imply. So what do they imply? The Prophet ﷺ is responsible for military activities. He's responsible for economic activities, for supporting his family. All of that's taking place. So when you look at every single role that he plays, when you look at every role that was emphasized by him, it gives you this holistic understanding. And a holistic understanding is the only way to understand Islam correctly.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have it, you're not going to understand. You're going to misunderstand Islam.
Yeah. And this idea of equality gets pushed so hardcore in our society. And what's funny, if you look at the Quran, it's not like every time you hear the word "la yastawun," it's used a lot in a negative connotation. So Allah will bring two things and say they're not equal, they're not equal, they're not equal, they're not equal. These things, you guys make these things equal, they're not equal. Or you want to put this and this together? How bad? Like, are you even thinking about it?
Yeah.
Almost every example I can think of in the Quran, it's never a good thing, because equality is not what people strive for. You want justice. You want what works for society, not for 1 and 1 equals, 1 equals 1. But that's not how it works.
And that's why the term equity is so much better. When it comes to gender equality, there's a good article by Khalid Beg, father of Shaykh Munib Beg. He talks about something about like gender equity, not equality. It's very interesting. So he basically makes this argument. It's a very good argument. He says the difference between equality and equity is that equity on both sides of the equation are going to balance out, but there's different things on both sides of the equation. So whatever you add on this side, that's a right. It's going to be a responsibility on the other side. You add a right on this side, there's going to be a responsibility on the other side. That's where justice comes in, right? And that's very important. So that concept of justice is more important than equality, because full gender equality, the way that it's perceived, results in injustice. And people can't understand that because they don't have the foundation about what we talked about in the beginning, about how men and women are different physically and they're different psychologically. They're different psychologically, and you try to make them exactly the same across the board, they're equal, then you're going to result in injustice. Right?
And by men and women being different, we're talking about biological differences, right? That's. Yeah, I'm just trying to be as clear cut, because anyone can say I'm a man or a woman now.
Okay.
You know, like we're talking biological differences between men and women. And if anyone wants to argue against that, then why is it when you say I am now a woman, you're going to start taking hormones?
Right.
So we all agree that there's some sort of biological distinction on the chromosomal level.
Yeah. So, I mean, in Islam, there's no distinction between sex and gender.
That's
and that's very important. I mean, it's an obvious, but it needs to be pointed out nowadays.
Yeah.
Because now there's a difference between sex and gender. In Islam, there's been no difference between sex and gender.
They're tied.
They're directly tied.
Yeah.
And gender is not just a manifestation of masculinity or femininity.
Or your social reality.
It's not just a social construct.
Yeah.
It is directly tied with sex, or it's synonymous, or if it's slightly different, it's directly tied, can't be untied.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess I can bring it back when you talk about the difference between men and women, and tie both the conversations, one on atheism, one on this. In your experience, have you found that when you deal with people who are having these doubts Islamically, or I'm an atheist now, do you find it to be more men or women in your experience? Or maybe if it's men, maybe it's because you speak to more men. I don't know.
Yeah, hard to say, but I mean, in my experience, it has been more men.
Why do you think that is?
I would say that atheism in particular seems to affect people who are in the hard sciences, and more men tend to be inclined towards the hard sciences.
Yeah. In Scandinavian countries, when they try to go as equal as possible, where did the men end up?
Exactly.
In the STEM fields. Where did the women end up? Nurturing fields.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's hard evidence for that. Yeah. So again, it could be. I mean, women talk to me about all other issues. So to say that it's because maybe they don't approach me. I hear that all the time. They're like, "Oh, well, that's you don't know because women just don't approach you." I'm like, well, let me just clarify first of all. I get probably more appointments from women than I do from men.
And what are they talking about?
I mean, it's all sorts of questions. Whether it's a basic fiqh question, to it's a family issue, to it's a marital issue, everything across the board. Even aqidah issues, qadr, how to understand qadr, all of that stuff. So it is across the board.
Okay.
Right. So I just want to clarify that because I keep getting people like, "Oh, well, you don't understand what women are going through because women don't come to you because you're not a woman." I'm like, you know what? That's a narrative that people are pushing, that women need to go to women, for example, because men can't understand them. This narrative is, look, there's an aspect of truth to it, but it's like saying, you know what? You can't understand what a drug addict is going through because you are not a drug addict. Therefore, you can't really offer much advice to someone. We need more drug addicts who can help other people.
Drug addict counselors. Yeah.
Drug addict counselors, which is okay. I mean, I think understanding the experience of someone who's gone through that, there's some benefit to that.
Empathize more.
Empathize, I get that. But there's a knowledge aspect that's universal. That's like women didn't come to the Prophet ﷺ to ask him questions. And then people misquote this hadith again about Aisha, that, some of them were shy. They would send her, cotton balls with like menstrual, blood on it. So, yeah, maybe.
Wait, what is that?
Oh, so basically what happened was some women, they were shy to go and ask the Prophet ﷺ directly certain things.
Oh, okay.
So they wanted to know when their menstruation is done. So they would actually take a cotton ball with like their menstrual, fluid on it, and they would send it to Aisha and say like, hey, can you check? Is it done for us? Right? And she would respond back and be like, no, look, you still got some fluid. Wait till it's completely white, or you see the whiteness or something. So they're like, see, they used to go to Aisha for issues like that rather than the Prophet.
Because that's a little more intimate.
It's a little bit more intimate, especially if you're going to send a cotton ball with, menstrual fluid on it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's like,
it makes sense.
That's that in that category. I get it, and I don't want women to come to me with something
balls.
like that, a cotton ball or something like that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that they can't approach someone who's knowledgeable about a subject, but just because they're a guy, they're not going to respond. You know, you're not going to be able to feel. We don't deal with any field like that. You don't go you're like, I need a woman economic advisor because she cannot experience what it's like to be a woman who's going to invest her money. I don't hear that happening, right? It just doesn't happen. And it's not going to, all these finance experts, they're all dominated by men. I mean, yeah, they are dominated by men. Does that mean you can be like, well, we need more women finance advisors? Maybe there's some benefit to that. But this idea of, well, we can't approach them and stuff like that, this is a huge problem. And this is part of that conflict that I'm mentioning about this idea of, you know, we have this patriarchy, it's oppressing us. That kind of reads into this idea of we shouldn't even approach a male scholar because he's going to give a biased interpretation, or we need female scholars to reinterpret the Quran from a female lens or a female perspective. Not
all male
not a
panels,
feminist,
all that.
even all male panels and all that stuff. So this stuff is very dangerous for our society because
there's no end to it, right? You're gonna have first it's all male. Yeah, you know, I there was actually a conference happening here in SoCal, and they had like a few ladies on there, and this was posted on one of the feminist pages, and like I'm really happy to see that they're finally including women in these panels.
I see that all the time.
The only thing is, I just really wish they would start, you know, representing some of the non-hijabi Muslims.
Right.
And then it was like non-hijabi African Muslims, and like we need some like the gay representation, who trans imams, and I'm just like, where does it end?
Yeah. It's not going to end, and the foundation of the argument is problematic. The foundation is built upon a notion that women are being purposely excluded from these places because they're women. Right, and that only for that reason, for no other reason, and that's a flawed logic, right? And the solution is to prove that this accusation is false. The burden of proof is on you, and how do you prove it? You prove it by making a 100% 50-50 distribution across the board. And if you erred on the side of having more than 50% on women, we'd be okay with that. It's like affirmative action type thing. But if you erred on the other side, it means that you've not done a sufficient job. The problem is, what about full representation of all aspects of the community? If you really wanted to do that, we have 1%, I don't know, 3% Malaysians, 14% Palestinians, 40% Desi or something like that. Are you going to go and break it down across the board to say equality? Or how do you know that
you've reached maximum equality?
Exactly. How can you prove that, right? So you can never prove it, nor can you, again, you're reading the intentions, or you're assuming the bad intentions of someone else. The bad intentions may exist, all right, in some capacities. But in most places, is it a bad intention? You have someone who you know has a very clear track record on having women students. You know, like our school has more women students, like most schools.
You find that across most Islamic schools?
Across most Islamic center, most Islamic classes. There's more women students. They get full accommodation. There's no restrictions for them in terms of their studying or their accessibility to teachers or whatever it is. You have someone with that track record, and you go, no, we're going to apply the exact same accusation to you. Anytime we don't see a number of women speakers on a particular panel, you're automatically going to be flagged as you're just like everyone else. At the same level, you must be discriminating. And then someone comes out with
internalized misogyny.
Exactly. And then someone comes out with this list, and they go, oh, look, I made this list of women speakers across the country. You could have easily invited one of them.
A lot of them are not actually qualified.
That's one. One of them are not qualified. Two, maybe the ones who are qualified, their honorariums are through the roof, right?
They don't think about the price it's a commodity. They're a hot commodity now.
That's it, right? So, I mean, you have women who have $5,000 honorarium. And what is their claim to fame?
Woman.
That they're women. All right. So I'm not saying.
Is $5K a lot nowadays? I thought that's like basic.
For me, I don't get that much. You know?
I want $5K just to go talk for a weekend.
For a lecture? No, for a lecture. Not for a weekend. For a lecture. Right?
Oh, you're talking like hours.
Talking about for one lecture.
Should charge MSA West, bro.
What the heck?
Yeah. So there's that, and then the third thing is, look. The thing is, people who make these accusations, they don't have management experience. Just think about. Look, you're mentioning they're in NorCal. Look, I have a small little program I don't have much time to organize it. I just need some local people who have enough knowledge to go and talk about it. Now you want me to fly this person out? You want me to get them a hotel? You want me to connect with them? I mean, just think about what burden it is. Like, well, if
Take them away from family.
Yeah, away from family, all that stuff.
Maybe they don't want to come.
Yeah, maybe they don't want to come. Maybe they're not interested. Maybe that's not their topic of specialization. They're like, no, you must have had a bias because we gave you some opportunities. This whole narrative is becoming widespread, but it's very toxic. It's very, very dangerous, and it's going to prevent people from doing organizing good programs, because now you're just getting nonstop pushback. It's hard enough to get people to organize any programs. Now you'd be like, oh, you're the guy who wants to put some time and effort away on the side to go and organize a program for the Muslim community. Well, guess what? We'll put some red tape on it.
Yeah.
Like, great, thanks a lot. Like, as if I
and what's
needed
funny,
that.
if you talk to some of the women getting invited, like I said, the Yafa, she was giving us an example of this, and she's saying, so she gets invited out. She's very articulate, mashallah. She has a base level of knowledge, and she says sometimes she feels very tokenized. She's like, I'm being invited. Why am I being invited? Because I'm a woman. Like, that's the only. She's like, I can tell when they're inviting me for that reason.
It's like the token African American. It bothers them so much.
Yeah,
when,
they know. They're not. No one's stupid. No one knows. When you show up at a panel and you're the only woman, it's like, I wonder.
Exactly.
No one wants that. No one wants to.
Yeah.
People want to be judged on their merit.
Exactly.
That's the.
Absolutely.
Otherwise
When Ingrid Mattson, Dr. Ingrid Mattson, became president of ISNA, there was discussion I was going through, and like a lot of people were like, we know exactly why. She may be the most qualified person for that position, but we know why that particular group put her in charge, because they just wanted to show, hey, look, we put a woman in charge, right? And it's that tokenizing. That's very problematic.
Yeah.
You're like, people know.
One thing I wanted to touch on is I think a lot of the people who purport these narratives with themselves, I think they're not all like you're talking about a little bit about that spiritual agitation you were facing.
Mm-hmm.
These people have it on like
Big
turned
time.
up to 10.
Oh yeah.
And
they're the loud voices though.
Well, that's why. And that it's not, I don't think it's them speaking, really. It's whatever's inside of them, and it's this anger, and it's this angst, and it's this a lot of it is, I've gone to the depths and back on Facebook groups and stuff, and you see a lot of these personalities jump around different Facebook groups, and they may share more intimate things on different groups. And a lot of it is, this happened to me so-and-so when I was growing up, or I was living here, and this happened to me, and I'm seeing this doctor, I have PTSD and all this stuff, and you're like, whoa, this person is, they're having some real big issues, and they blame it on, patriarchy, right? And that's
They want to know it. Yeah. You got to put the blame somewhere.
Yeah. Sometimes I think they do need a little bit of like, you got to deal with them a little bit with empathy, with love and compassion, because you can hit them with the logical arguments all day, but I feel like they're just.
I mean, they're human beings.
They're human beings,
by
right?
Something, right?
Yeah. Like, what's her name? The Egyptian one, the red-haired one. You know what I'm talking about? Big feminist Egyptian lady.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but the name doesn't come across my head.
She's on social media.
Oh, she's really big. So I just keep forgetting all their names today. But
I know the academics.
Yeah.
But
she's academic, I think.
Fatima Mernisi.
No.
Okay.
No. But yeah, her thing was, I think she was like, during the Egyptian protests, she was like captured by the police, and she was like molested or something. And ever since then, it's like, screw the patriarchy, and she just drops F-bombs all over social. That's like her thing. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. I mean, this happens to men. When Imam Anwar was captured and he was tortured, he came out a different person, declaring
Anwar
al-Awlaki, right?
Oh,
comes
AAA.
out.
AAA. Okay.
So he's like, he comes out, he's been tortured, in prison. He comes out and he's declaring war on America, and he's coming up. Obviously, what happened to him is not justified at all. But at the same time, it's like he came out with a really radical narrative.
Yeah.
So it happens to men and women both when they're going through some traumatic experience. That's part of life. That's the challenge, and that's the test that people have. So.
Allah help us.
Yeah, I mean. But yeah, like you said, we got to have a human element. We got to try to understand what they're going through without justifying what they're doing. Right. So approach them and say, look, I understand what you're going through. It's very challenging. It's difficult, and I can sympathize / empathize with you. In some level, but at the same time, like, there's a line that needs to be drawn. You shouldn't go beyond this and start saying things and preaching things that are detrimental to the Muslim community.
What do you suggest for the Muslim male? right? Specifically towards men, right? You're dealing with these different narratives, and you're trying to reorient yourself. You know, before you're even getting married, this is for yourself as a human being, as a person who's trying to function in this society. What do you suggest for someone like that? I mean, I know for you, you know, you seem to kind of, even before you kind of went in, you know, studying Islam, you already had the idea of, you know, my intellect is the most important thing to me, and that's what I'm going to judge things by. I'm going to read, I'm going to educate myself, and that's good. You read the right books, and you have a little bit of sincerity, Allah will guide you. But someone who's completely lost, right? You know, where does someone like that, where do you start, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you start always by asking Allah for help, right? You start and ask Allah for balance, ask Allah for guidance to see what is right and wrong when you're confused. And the second thing is you have to seek knowledge. There's no other way around this than to seek knowledge. So like you said, there's the trend that everything is becoming very emotion-based.
Yeah.
So if it's becoming emotion-based, that's not the way in which you make important decisions in your life about anything. You have to research it. You have to think through it. When you're thinking about some political policy, you read some research on it and you try to understand, okay, well, what are the viewpoints here? Same thing when it comes to someone who's confused about the role of males and females in society. Where do you draw the line between what is socially constructed masculinity versus what is toxic versus healthy masculinity? You need to start having conversations with people who are well versed.
So we probably need like some good role models in your life.
Need some role models. You need to do some reading. You need to do just self-improvement, and you will start to arrive at a balanced kind of fitra, like a natural perspective of where you should be.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people should start.
Yeah. I think that's definitely easier said than done. I feel like nowadays it's,
I know.
You know, even through college, I feel like they try to prolong that, of being like a child. You know, the childhood phase is being prolonged even through college.
I mean, the idea of a teen is a construction, right? It's a social construction that it's the 20th century phenomenon.
Yeah.
So
for someone to, you have to be willing to burden yourself with some responsibility to grow as a person. Yeah. I
mean, on that note, I mean, that's part of what's contributing to the problem, is that people are growing up with very little responsibility. You know, at home they have very little, few chores, few things to do, and then when they go to school, you know, they're in a lovely environment.
School's really easy. High school is ridiculously.
High school is easy.
It's a joke.
College is actually quite easy, depending on which one you're at. But most of them are. You look at the trajectory, the amount of hours that students have studied 40 years ago, even in Ivy League schools, is half. Today is half of what it used to be in the past. So standards have dropped completely, and schools are like they say universities are like those vacation places, those luxury resorts, basically.
Yeah, resort. Yeah.
And that's what it looks like. It's almost like a resort. It looks awesome, right? So if that's going to be your environment, what's going to happen? Your mentality. You're not going to learn very much responsibility. Yes. You know, you're living in a dorm, and maybe you make your bed, maybe you don't. Maybe you learn how to clean your clothes or something like that. But most of the students don't cook.
Would you like sugar, Sheikh?
Yeah, sugar, please.
I think the first time I did laundry was in college. Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but
me too.
Yeah,
the first time I did laundry, I bought two what's it called? Not detergent, but the other
softeners.
Yeah, I bought 2 fabric softeners, and I called my mom, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was, "I'm doing laundry." She's like, "You bought 2 fabric softeners." I'm like, "Yeah, they smell nice." She's like, "This is not gonna work."
And it's unfortunate because it's like my kids, or inshallah, like my son at least. I want to give him chores and all that, and I'm like, I never had chores. I made it out okay. I was like, nah, but it's gonna make a big difference.
This idea of I made it out okay and I survived. I hear this all the time, but this is not a good narrative. Yeah. And the thing is that if you just look back and say, if you look at the clear-cut research on what kind of being spoiled, how it leads to a certain type of entitlement and what effect it has in your life, that whole narrative needs to change. Yes. When I was in India, I had to wash my clothes by hand. I had no idea what I was doing, right? I didn't know
By hand on the little rafter thing.
yeah, like that. Yeah, you have to wash it on there, and then you have to. So I didn't know how to dry. I didn't know how to squeeze my clothes. So I remember I had watched one of the Batman movies where like Robin is like squeezing clothes or something like that. I'm like, yeah, okay, you know, I'm trying to squeeze these clothes, and I don't know how much you're supposed to squeeze. So I thought I'd squeezed enough, and it was winter, and I put my towel only one time. I put it up there, and it's just not drying. And it starts smelling, and I'm just like, what the heck is going on? And finally, I asked one of my friends for help. I didn't like to ask people for help. Finally, asked him for help. He's like, what the heck are you doing? Like, you don't even know how to squeeze clothes. I'm like, no, I don't. I barely know how to use a washing machine, let alone squeezing clothes. So I had like one of my friends actually wash my underwear for me, you know? And it was Awais Namazi. And I'll never forget. I love the guy. I'm indebted to that guy for the rest of my life, you know? But I didn't even know how to wash my own underwear, right? Yeah. And then when you learn it, you start to realize, man, this is how 80% of the world's population lives. You know, and then you come back, and what you do is when you experience a washing machine, like in Egypt, I had a washing machine from the 1960s. It just like swirls the clothes around. It doesn't really do much, and then you dry them, you know, on a rack.
Yep.
You appreciate that piece of junk, you know, because you had something even less than that. Yep. And that appreciation and that experience is life-changing, especially for men. I think it's really important because some ideas of masculinity that we're talking about, you know, masculinity was different before we had all this technology. There was a different role for men, and that role is shifting primarily because of the change in technology. It's not just change of philosophy, it's a change of technology. Entitlement, all that stuff, you know. So if we didn't have the technology, the gender roles would have been a lot more different and divided than they are today.
And I think a lot of the tech we're referring to, it's not the most obvious thing. We're not talking about iPhones, computers, cameras. There's a lot of development that's going on around you. The whole tech development that allows you to be able to go to the grocery store and buy a steak, right? There's a whole tech, you know, field behind that. So, you know, your role as a hunter gatherer, you know, that innate, you know, role is no longer there. So how do you still act on, you know, that male energy? You know, like I know there's a huge Muslim population here in SoCal, you know, they're a lot into martial arts.
Yes.
Right. I've heard, you know, Imam, I think it's Dawood Walid, not Dawood Walid.
Yeah. Zaytuna?
Yeah.
Zaytuna. Oh, the Zaytuna.
Yeah.
And he also takes people out on like excursions for days. You know, they go hunting with bows and arrows, and they live in the wilderness and eat berries. You know, that's, you know, I think that's almost like, you know, we need to have our own version of Boy Scouts, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe just join Boy Scouts.
Not anymore. Now with the shift. There was that whole debate about the LGBT and gay
they didn't let the gay guy
and all that
in
stuff, and there was a lot of politics within Boy Scout. I mean, it's still good.
Do they let girls in now?
So there was the whole issue of that too. So it's shifting over. There's it's like a battleground basically. Yeah. Boy Scouts is a battleground right now.
Okay, never mind.
But there's still benefit in what they do. So, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of like an Islamic version of a Boy Scouts. Right?
Yeah, I feel like
MCA I think has one in the Bay Area. They'll see them dressed up on Jama'ah, and they'd come into the masjid all Boy Scouts.
Yeah, I mean, in our masjid we have a Girl Scouts.
Okay.
You know, I don't know why there's no Boy Scouts, but there's Girl Scouts.
But boys definitely need it. I mean, there is a reason why, like, as men, we're not doing that well nowadays. They say, you know, we're graduating not as much as women. We're, you know, our grades are not as good. You know, we're highest suicide rate, highest incarceration rate, most likely to commit a felony, a crime, most likely to be involved in aggravated assault. Like, you know, all this stuff is not just happening because you're a man. You know, there's
part of it is because you're a man.
Yeah, I mean, there's that male energy that if you don't know how to channel it, control it, nurture it, it can turn into aggression.
That's probably why sports became such a big thing. If you think about it, it's an emotional outlet. It's a way for me to run as fast as I can
and hit
as hard as I can in these directions, and it's okay. It's accepted by society.
Yep. And there's research on that, like the testosterone, you know, that men have, like when there's some a sense of achievement, like when they win a competition or something like that, they get a hit of dopamine because of the fact that they're men, and they have a different sense of achievement, you know, in terms of that competition, that energy that they have. So like what you're saying is energy, if it's not manifested in the right direction, it's going to be manifested in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, I think, and when you look at it, I feel like when you look at it on like a probability graph, what are they called?
Bell graph.
Like, a bell graph. We occupy the extremes. You're either like, you know, a lot of men are hyper successful and a lot of men are like, hyper troublemakers, right? So that's not, you don't want to, as a gender, you don't want to be.
It's an inverted bell curve. It should be the other way around.
Yeah. So that's the, and that's.
Yeah, women talk about equality, but they don't want equality on the troublemaker end. They want equality at that little 1%.
The 1% end. Whereas, like, even as a guy, you're like, I'm probably never gonna be, you know,
I'm not there either.
The CEO of Fortune 500 company. That's probably just not gonna happen.
Right.
You know, but at the same time, you know, as a man, you do have these male tendencies, male energies, male aggression, and as like a leader of a home, like you have to figure out a way to deal with that because. That you know you're responsible for your family, right?
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, men tend to work more than women. You know, there's that argument about the wage gap, right, between men and women. You know, when I first heard that, I was just like, I was appalled. I was like, oh, this is horrible. You know, this is proof that, you know, there is this systematic oppression that does exist. And then when I looked it up, I started researching a little bit more. I'm like, wait a minute. This data is completely skewed. It was a complete, what's the right term? It's like not only misrepresentation, it's like it's misleading data.
There you go.
Yeah.
The data was aggregate take-home salary, not
everybody.
Not of everyone. So basically, the assumption, the way that it's presented is, okay, a woman engineer and a man engineer in the exact same field, working the exact same hours. One makes, you know, 60,000 and one makes 40,000. I'm like, but that's not what the data says. The data says, but this guy is actually working 60 hours and she's working 40 hours. So because they're working more, the aggregate take-home salary.
Of course, it's more.
Of course, it's going to be more.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you don't, so that's really misleading. But it's even misleading to the point where the first time I heard it, I was just like, you know what?
Well, when Obama goes up there and says it, that, you know, you believe it.
Well, what bothers me more is I heard this at a Islamic organization banquet.
What the heck?
Okay, and there was a comedian presenting. Oh, I'll mention him. I don't have a problem. It was Jeremy McClellan. I think he's.
Is he Muslim?
He's
No,
not.
no.
No, he's not even Muslim.
Catholic.
Yeah. He's a nice guy and stuff, but he's presenting this information and everyone's clapping and laughing at it, and I'm just like, okay. And all Muslim leaders are there, and everyone swallows it. I even swallowed. I went home, and I'm like, for a few months, I didn't realize it, and then all of a sudden, I didn't question it. I'm like, yeah, it must be the case, and even that kind of misleading information affects the way in which I'm going to be teaching people, right? And then when I look it up, I was just so frustrated. I'm like, I was lied to, basically. This is a lie. If you look at the entirety, it's straight up propaganda, and it's no better than a Fox News lie.
It's not just that; it's also taking to aggregate of every working person, which you know, a lot of women occupy
teachers, and they don't make as much as an engineer. Straight up,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Healthcare providers,
right?
Not doctors, but
right.
like bedside nurses, that kind of thing. Right. They're definitely not going to paid as much.
Yeah. Exactly. So what bothers me is when Muslim leaders are going to quote this stuff, right? And then when Muslim individuals who are confused, like college students or high school students, they're going to swallow this, and it's going to affect their entire worldview.
Yeah.
And they don't even know until maybe 10 years later that their whole worldview has been affected by false, you know, misleading data, and they built their entire worldview on a lie.
And they may have a family now.
Absolutely.
And now they're running into issues, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and this data actually, the reason, if they present it as it is, and this is why you get people being pushed at, women, they don't want them to quit their careers and whatnot, because they're saying, the woman, why are they not working as many hours as the man? Because she has to go back home to her kid. And I think Vox, they actually like broke it down, so they did try and show why it exists. And essentially it's because a woman goes and takes care of her family more than the man, and the man's staying more hours. That's like, yeah, the man I'm still trying to find a guy who's like, I love work. 60 hours a week, that's my thing.
Yeah.
I love corporate America. I love going in more hours, the better. It's like, no one wants to do that.
No.
I don't understand this
Even the
mentality.
most hardworking culture, I mean, Japanese, for example,
Yeah.
they're overworked. Suicide rate is extremely high. Even when you look at their society, the people are not saying that we enjoy working. That's why we work a lot. The expectation is that we're forced to. If we don't, you're the first person who's leaving that company. Everyone else is looking around at you like, oh, man, dude, this guy, he's only been here 3 years and he's leaving before the guy who's been here for 10 years. So there's this pressure that's there. People, who, like you're saying, people who think that, you know, men enjoy working all these long hours, I don't think that's the case. It's definitely not the case.
Definitely not. We definitely. I mean, I know my purpose working. You know, like you work to provide.
That's
you
it.
know, that's you know, you don't have to be super passionate and love your work, but you have to be comfortable with it enough to
Yeah.
provide a halal means to your family, which
Yeah.
is your end goal as a male.
Yeah. And well, that's another huge topic that you just reminded me of, is that this idea of males being the earners. That's a lot of men are not getting jobs.
What do
And,
you like? Just
they're
not like not college degrees, or just
no.
they're not?
We after college, they don't know what they want to do in life. They're sitting around for 5 years, 10 years. They're not working. I get cases like this all the time.
So what do? They just sit at home play games?
They're sitting at home playing games. Parents living off of their parents, saying that they want to figure out what they want to do, or they want to become like a social entrepreneur or whatever, and they want to start like
Life
a little
coach.
life coach,
Life couch.
life coach. I mean, I think that
Instagram
the
entrepreneur.
concept of life coach is a good concept, but this is like a default of, oh, I'm starting my own business. I'm going to become a life coach. I'm going to be a YouTuber. I'm going to somehow figure out like this little niche where I don't have to work much. And,
Exactly.
you know, so this is becoming very, very common. And
Thank you, Gary V.
Yeah. And what's happening is people are getting married, and women are coming to me, or Muslim women are coming to me on a regular basis and saying, this guy doesn't want to work. And I said, what does he do? Either he sits around, plays games, and his parents support him, or he's like, oh, I'm starting my own business and I'm exploring ideas and I'm coming up with, you know, the next big idea. And they're like, I can't live with this guy. And a lot of women end up getting
It's really
divorced,
sad.
and they have a valid grounds for divorce Islamically if the guy's not going to provide for them.
Yeah.
Then it's
Right.
It's really
So,
sad.
so this is a huge problem, and it's partly because of like this defining of masculinity. If men have a clear-cut understanding that their role is the provider, well, you better get your butt out there and provide, right?
Yeah.
If you want to get married, I want to get married, you know, obviously guys like, I want to have sex and, you know, this and that. Okay, we get all that, but
it's like one dimension
that's
of like a multi.
exactly.
You know, that's
But you know, you want to do that, all that, good, but you got to do your role too. This is your role. Get out there and
I
provide.
mean, it's
You know,
that's part of the society we live in, though, right? Like, you know, maybe as a male in a traditional society, that was like, you know, maybe you could say the reward of your hard work. You know, you get married, this is your family now, and you can enjoy this aspect of life. But if you could just go enjoy that and not have any of the responsibility, birth control. I'm not saying birth control is haram. I'm saying because it exists, there's no consequence of someone getting pregnant. And now if someone does get pregnant, you don't have to be responsible for it because you can just abort.
abort, yeah.
And there's a case now where the guy doesn't want the kid and the woman wants it. And the court is saying, okay, because he doesn't want it, he doesn't have to provide child support.
Oh, interesting.
Which is, from our point of view, that's
Ridiculous.
Of course.
that's not Islamic
Of
at all.
course,
If
yeah.
it's your kid, you provide
Absolutely.
compensation. So
Yeah, I mean, we're hitting this ridiculous point. It's got to be a tipping point. I don't know. I'm predicting with my no knowledge, right? 20 years from now, there's either going to be a crazy suicide rate or a religious renaissance. One or the other. Like, people cannot continue on this. They're going to be sold this lie of dunya, sex, whatever, money, career. Maybe even not even 20, 10 years from now, we'll hit the point where, like, you know what? That was all a complete lie, and I'm empty inside. So they either start killing themselves off
Yep.
or finding religion. One or the other. I don't know where else we can go from here.
the suicide rate in Western countries is up.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
Seattle, where everyone has as much money as you could possibly
Right.
get, the least church attendance with the highest PhD per capita rate,
Yeah.
kill themselves off more than everybody else.
Yeah.
Weather might contribute, but
No.
everything else too.
I think we are at that tipping point. It's happening now.
Maybe.
With the conservative
Yeah.
conservative right.
Yeah, and I agree. It's gonna be one of the two options.
Yeah.
You know, because even this new age spirituality alternatives that people are going to, that's not sufficient
Yeah.
for most people. Right?
Yeah.
So it's gonna be one of these two.
Meditation, quiet time, write
Yeah.
down 10 things you're thankful for.
Yes,
You'll
exactly.
feel better.
I said this on another podcast, but I'll tell it to you. I had a guy, he was seeing a therapist for like a addiction he was dealing with, and the therapist told him, you need to sit with yourself 5 times a day and just complete quietness and reflect. And he's like, it's been great. And it's like, he's a Muslim guy, you know? And I'm like, what are you doing? You know, like, if you weren't getting that from your prayers, then that was,
you've been cheated.
You're getting your religion from a perennialist. That is bad news.
Yeah, man, these things
But yeah.
fall up. I mean, you see it everywhere. I mean, we talking about those career generals. So I work with a lot of orthopedic surgeons in my career. I want you to imagine, what gender do you think 99.9999% of orthopedic surgeons are? What gender do you think they are?
I think they identify as men.
They identify as cis men, yes.
Cis men.
Cis
men.
Yes, very
He,
nice.
me, whatever. I don't know the genders. Yeah, of course. Why is that, though? I mean, can't a woman be an orthopedic surgeon? No, man. These guys are breaking. It's like they're doing yard work. And you watch these guys, they come like, they go, crack. Come over here, smack as hard as they possibly can with a hammer. They are hitting certain implants into the body, smacking them out. So like, what am I watching? Is this surgery or is this like construction work?
Wow.
Yeah, but they just
Murder.
but I mean, it's just more natural. The men incline towards it, and it also takes way more time to specialize in these things. The women want to start a family, naturally, so they don't go as deep into these things, right?
Yep.
They might go into psychology, they may become a psychiatrist, just as much specialization, but in a less physical field. I wonder why, when the opportunities are open to both.
I'm a civil engineer. I've spent a lot of time in the construction field. I've seen one woman in my 5 years. My 5 years in the industry, I have seen one woman as a construction worker. And that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not like we definitely do need construction workers.
Yeah.
But that's,
Well, I mean, the thing is, that narrative, that idea, that concept is just, it's anathema to people. It's like you cannot say that the inequality in the workforce is because of a natural inclination. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
But you can't say it. If you say it, then you're like, you know what? Oh, that means that women are not inclining towards STEM fields, or they're not inclining towards something else. That's like against the philosophy that is prevalent today. So, president of Harvard a few years back, about 10 years ago, he was giving a speech, and he mentioned a statement where he goes, the reason why there's so many men in STEM fields and not women is because men tend to incline towards STEM fields. He got booed. Got booed in the audience. A MIT woman professor, she walked out. She's like, I'm appalled. It became a big news article and this and that. She goes, look, I'm in the field. Like, so somehow, like, the exception proves that, all of a sudden it should be somehow mixed. The thing is, the data on this is so clear. The research on it is very clear, but still there's a underlying ideology. It's an ideology, and that's what people need to understand. The ideology takes precedence over whatever research is going to show. The same thing when it comes to whole gender, different genders, and non-binary gender and all that. It doesn't matter what the research shows.
it's the ideology.
The ideology will trump everything else.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what's happening in California school system with the gender curriculum and all of that stuff. It doesn't matter if people are like, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know there was a seminar a few weeks ago.
Sure. Yeah.
So what did they pass? They passed a bill.
So they passed a bill that there's going to be a new gender curriculum inside California schools that's going to start at the age of kindergarten. No, pre-K. Actually.
Wait, what? Pre-K?
Pre-K.
No.
Pre-K.
You're not even talking about cooties.
No.
And pre-K. Are you serious?
Yes. So pre-K. Okay.
Oh
and
my God.
You can see which books are pre-K, which books are K, which books are middle school, elementary school. So the kindergarten books are basically like, there's like a book about a crayon.
A crayon.
The crayon is a pre-K level. It's a crayon, and the crayon is blue. Okay, it's got the Crayola wrapped around it, right?
Yeah.
But on the inside, it's actually red. And people keep thinking that it's blue, but it's actually red on the inside, right? And then they go and they present this whole thing, and they go, see, the real identity of this crayon was actually red, and you guys mistook it, and there was this pressure that was being put on there, and there was another crayon that was a mean crayon that was trying to push it on there, and books like that. And there's a ton of books, entire curriculum, and this is mandated to be read, number one. Number two, parents are not going to be informed that their kids are going to be exposed to these books.
Back when I was in school, I had to sign like a waiver for the sex ed.
Yeah, not anymore. That's done. Forget sex ed. So gender ed is not something that you can just get waived. Right? You have to. You can go and file a complaint, maybe or maybe not. They'll let you out of elementary school, but once you hit middle school, there's no waivers. They're not going to inform you. The whole thing has just changed. So we're not only talking about transgender, right? That they have stories like, oh, this is Bobby, this is Mike, this is Jane, right? And then Jane is like a guy dressed up like a guy, but it's Jane. So they have the trans part of things, but they have something beyond that. In gender, kindergarten. So they're like, you know what?
What?
They straight up ideology says some people are male, they show males. Some people are female. Some people are both, show both. Some people are neither, they show neither. And they go, and you should respect all of your friends who define with different pronouns. So the pronouns of Z, pronoun of tree, like tree is a pronoun, for example. So now, when you're referring to Bobby, if you say, me and Bobby, we went to the playground, and
Tree did XYZ.
Tree went on the slide. You can't say he went on the slide. You can't say she went on the slide, because he defines as tree. You have to say tree went on the slide.
How do you spell tree?
Tree, like a tree.
Tree.
What's it stand for?
It stands for someone. It's within the non-binary category.
Okay.
Non-binary
Does it
meaning
mean
not
Z?
male, not male. Like Z is one option. Z and tree are like interchangeable.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about this.
Yeah. So and not only that, in the kindergarten curriculum, and it goes, and there's so many more genders than this, and more genders can be invented, and you can come up with any gender you want. So you come up with any gender you want, and you have to be identified that way. And now, if someone doesn't identify a child like that or a kid like that in class, discrimination case. Very open to discrimination. So that's the curriculum. Now, the thing is, most people are not down with that. Most people are not down with that.
Most people are at least sensible enough to say,
The
I
vast
at least
majority-
want to be informed.
Yeah.
For do whatever you want, but inform me.
Forget the parents. Most educators are not down with this, right? But they don't do anything. They're not going to say anything. Why? Because they know it's an ideology that's so powerful. They speak out, they're going to get shut down, right? So that's why I'm saying the ideology is not even in line with what people think, what they believe, nor is it in line with scientific research, nor is it. There's no basis. There's no scientific backing for this, but it's the ideology that's been pushed.
This is like the new medieval medieval church. It was just an ideology not based on anything, and then it collapsed in on itself. Eventually, that's
what they say. The university is the new church, and the professors are the new clergy.
Yeah, Latif. Oh my goodness.
You would think this thing would like die out because these guys are not reproducing. They don't have families, right? But they're doing it in such a way that they're cultivating a new generation that will have these ideas from birth. And because parents are so disconnected from how their kids are being educated, like you're saying, send them to public school. I got my free time. They're going to teach you, right? Good. Go get a job after that. Get married. Leave me by myself. And they're not realizing, especially the Muslim parents are not realizing. And because they're there's a fitrah there that you don't expect a system to corrupt your child. Like it's in you innately to say like, I trust the government to take care of my kid when I'm sending you and I'm giving you a trust with my child. So I get why. And a lot of them are immigrant parents. They can't connect. They don't understand. They can't even help them with their homework. Like, unfortunately, right? They can take care of them and do food and laundry, right? And that's what they do.
Hence having the educated wife.
Seriously, it makes such a big difference today. Like if your kid goes out and comes home and says, Mom, I need help with homework, and she's a quote unquote stay at home mom. Oh no, she can't get a career, but she sees this stuff. She says, I can help you get around this and explain it to you in a way that makes sense without you just eating it up.
Right.
Is this just public school or even?
It's public school, homeschooling curriculum, charter schools, anyone that is getting any money from the government. Only private schools are going to be exempt for now.
Okay, but with private schooling, they just have to get accredited, right? Because to be accredited as when a private school gets accredited,
it's through a private organization. It's not through the government.
Oh, really?
Accreditation, WASC, Western Association of Schools and Colleges, all regional accreditation and national accreditation. Accreditation is not through the government. They're a private entity.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Islamic schools, like
are you guys accredited?
CIU? No, not yet.
Not yet?
CIU,
Okay.
no. But our Minor Academy, the private school, the Islamic school, they're accredited.
Okay.
For their K through 8 program.
Okay,
It's through a private, IOK's K through 8 or K through 12 or whatever is also accredited. Yeah.
Okay. So those ones, they're untouched. It's only if you take government money.
It's only if you're taking government money right now.
And if you homeschool,
if you're taking government money, which you usually are with homeschooling, you get a little bit percentage of money to invest. Then you are liable, right? So what you do is, the solution that I was told is basically you take your kids, you put them on the slides, or you put them on the swings, and you read to them the curriculum while they're playing around, and you're like, okay, check the curriculum. They read it, it's sufficient. And that's it. But what's going to happen is it's getting bad. It's Canada, UK. This has been
Canada was the worst. That's what started with
Canada and UK, basically. Both of them almost simultaneously. Curriculum has been passed. But not only, when you're at home, you're going to read the book to your kids. That's one thing. Over there, teacher is going to read it to your kids. Going to put activities to emphasize that this is the case. Not only that, in Canada, they're bringing a drag queen. Okay? A drag queen is like, someone who's dressing up, like cross-dressing, sometimes in like very weird, evil horns, all sorts of weird stuff.
Very demonic,
Very demonic. They're going to bring a drag queen to come in and read gender books to children to brainwash them.
They do that here. Public libraries will.
They do it in the public library here as well.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
There was like an issue. The guy wasn't wearing underwear, so he flashed all the kids when he sat down.
Oh, man.
But like the parents are bringing their kids.
That's what I'm saying. This is what you doing, dude? Parents are bringing the kids, and it's just normalized. And the more people who are quiet about it, the more it becomes normalized.
Yeah, that one, honestly, that one surprises me, because drag or cross-dressing or man ladies, as they're called in some, that was like the fringe of, like, that was maybe like when I was in high school.
Yep, it was complete fringe.
Yeah.
But what's happening is the concerted effort to normalize it.
SubhanAllah.
Right? And people don't know the history of it too. I mean, it's existed.
Yeah, Ismail Royer. Ismail Royer?
Yes, Ismail Royer.
Yeah, he put like excerpts of a book on Twitter called like The Last Ball or something, and it's the LGBTQ manifesto. And in it they outline.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Imam Siraj sent it to me, and
Imam Siraj.
I'm gonna get in trouble just for mentioning his name. He's like, look, man, leave me. I keep doing what you're doing, but like.
Yeah, Moveen Vade told us about it too in a similar. The bouncing
I think he already got
ball,
in
or
trouble.
the blue ball. I can't remember what it was.
I have the book actually.
It's called like Reclaiming the Ball or something like that.
Yeah, and it's their agenda from the 1960s, saying like this is how we're gonna be mainstreamed and normalized in society.
And they even say like, drag, you guys are a little fringe right now, so we'll get you guys later. Just stick with us. It's like paraphrased.
I mean, it's incredible just how they're pushing this, and it's weird. Like, if all the things are normalized, man, like this, how did this become it?
It's called after the ball.
There you go.
How America will accept.
Exactly.
LGBT.
Yeah. I think it's 90s or something like that.
Yeah.
Early 90s.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
well planned out. Yeah, it's well planned out.
I mean, I think Muslims, we need to come up with something, like a book.
I'm working
the
on
Quran.
The Quran, mashallah, alhamdulillah.
That one has a good plan in it.
I'm working. It's not a plan. I'm working on a policy document, basically saying this is what Islam says about LGBT, and I'm presenting to the Fiqh Council in May. Hopefully, if it passes, my concern is this: like, look, anyone who's over 50, they're clear cut on this issue because they grew up in a different,
Yeah.
Anyone who's like under 30, doesn't matter. Even the people who are very influenced by Islam, the scholars, imams, whatever it is, they're either so afraid or they have such a soft spot on this issue. Like, they themselves have been affected to a point where it's hard to even understand. So what I would like to see is the elder generation of Muslims who are very clear cut on this issue give some, before they pass away, give some clear guidelines about, look, here's some statements from us that are just clear cut.
Yeah.
That you guys need to make sure you don't waffle on this issue down the road, just because they happen to be a very powerful minority, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm hoping to do, and I'm seeing that a lot of people are afraid, man.
Definitely.
Some
people lose their jobs because of this stuff.
Muslim imams are afraid to even speak. People are afraid. I'm telling you, Muslim imams are afraid to speak. One of them told me.
What?
One of them told me, very, very prominent imam. He says, what you're doing good work, because I kind of have lectures on this issue and stuff. He's like, you keep up the work that you're doing because someone's got to do it. He says, to be honest, I'm afraid to speak about this because I get so much pushback wherever I am.
SubhanAllah.
So you keep doing what you're doing, and I promise you, I'm gonna visit you when you're in jail. I'm like, okay,
Dang.
Thanks, man.
This is like the the madkhalis of America. They don't want to talk about LGBT. Subhanallah. That is.
So that's where we're
crazy.
at right now. And I spoke to some other ones, and they're like, we can't be very we can't be very open about it because it's just a really tough issue. It's this and that, and I'm just like,
I don't think you can be soft on this one.
Uh,
You'll get steamrolled. We're getting steamrolled.
we are, and not only that, the thing is, if no one talks about it, what's gonna happen to the next generation?
Half the nation doesn't agree with this.
So what happened is,
You know?
there was a leader of one of the Muslim organizations here in SoCal, really good brother. I met him in the masjid just a few weeks ago, and I'm like, by the way, your organization had recently sponsored a banquet where a lesbian Muslim actress who won like the award for best kissing scene, lesbian kissing scene or something, was invited at that program, and your organization sponsored it. And he's like, man, I had no idea this and that. And I'm like, well, you better be careful next time, because I just want to ask you, are you clear on this issue? He goes, man, look, this guy's a convert too. He's like, before I was Muslim, I was clear on this issue. I'm so clear on this issue, but you know what? This issue is breaking my family apart.
Subhanallah.
I said, what do you mean? My kids come, and my kids come and they say, you're a bigot, Dad. You're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe. He said, these are my own kids. And they think I'm like some kind of backwards guy for thinking that something is wrong with homosexuality. He's like, I can't, in my own kids, because they're being brainwashed every day. He said, it's breaking my family. This is what they think about me. So he goes, how am I supposed to deal with that? And he's African American. So he goes, in the African American community in LA, very prominent. So he's like, if I address this issue, I'm like, get constant pushback. You're not with the minority
I'm surprised in the
movement.
African American community, they're very. You'd
for
think
some
they're
reason-
very clear cut on this because
for
they
some,
have a.
no, you're looking at the young African American community has bought into this idea of intersectionality, which is basically all minorities must team together.
Oh, the critical race theory, all that good
Yeah,
stuff. Okay.
yeah. So if all minorities team together against this power structure, this is the only way it's going to work. So minorities must support minorities, and that's what kind of pushed a lot of African Americans into like
And
the
Muslims,
progressive
yeah.
and Muslims, yeah, same thing.
Okay.
So it's very becoming more and more prominent in the African American community in particular.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah. So like, the only solution is just make dua, homeschool your kids.
Make dua, and again, there's stuff that can be done.
I mean, you're telling me this is an imam or someone who's well known, and his own kids are.
yeah.
So don't send your kids to university. Teach them how to code at home. Start a drop shipping business.
No, what's interesting. So you're mentioning how people are afraid to talk about it, but I have, when I talk to our friends about it, some of them are just apathetic, and I think a lot of Muslims, it's not that they're pro LGBT, they're just like, it's not harm that, the argument. If it's not harming you, they're doing it in the privacy of their own home. What do you care?
Well, the guy in Wuhan, China, they were eating whatever in the privacy of their own home, and now look how it's affecting the whole world.
Well,
Yeah,
that's one part of it is like, no, actually, private actions at home aren't
Affect
quote
society,
unquote.
yeah.
Everything affects society.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But in case you can't understand that, that's your problem, not the policy's problem. The other thing is, they also don't see that this is affecting curriculum being pushed out. Like, no, dude, they're just a bunch. Yeah, they're a bunch of. For some reason, they represent 25. Or what is it now? They hit 10% of representation on TV, and their goal is to hit 25% by 2025, and then push up from there.
Yep.
Mubin Vey just showed
Oh,
this
shared that,
statistic,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just ridiculous. Oh, that's all they're doing. They're just on TV. Like, yeah, that was just brainwashing everybody who's watching
Exactly, yeah.
everything.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah, I had a it was my brother actually. I hate to call him out, but he's not that involved in Islam, but I mean, he's a normal Muslim guy, right? So he's a big Star Wars fan. So I'm like, hey, did you watch the
Ending scene.
the ending scene of lesbian kissing scene and all that? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what are your thoughts? He's older than me. I'm like, you're kind of a little bit older generation, somewhat. What were your thoughts? And he's just a random, average Joe Muslim kind of guy. So I'm like, I wanted to know what he thought. And he's like, no, it's not a big deal. I'm like, why is it not a big deal? He's like, yeah, it's, there was worse scenes in the past in Star Wars. It was kind of moving in that direction and this and that. And then I had read an article about this that explained it this way. And I'm like, interesting. So you're basically just parroting exactly what the article was to downplay, why Disney put the scene in there, which is Disney is supposed to be like a kid's, brand or whatever it is. And he's like, yeah, it's not such a big deal. So my point is that if they're affecting people who are even from that generation. With every article that comes out, or every explanation that comes out, every little kissing scene, every little
step in that direction, yeah.
Every step in that direction is to completely normalize it, and they're like, it's not a big deal. So what's gonna happen? His kids, my nieces and nephews, they're gonna grow up watching this stuff. It's gonna be completely normalized, and they'll be like, well, I don't understand. If it happens in Star Wars, and if it happens in this movie, and
It's
it happens
natural.
It's in the Arthur cartoon
It's
now.
it's in the animal kingdom.
yeah.
Dolphins,
Yeah.
whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the arguments, they sound nice, right? They sound well packaged. It's natural. You're gonna tell me someone shouldn't act on something natural? I say, okay, look it. And this is one teacher put it. He's very into animals. He said, look, there's a guy. He has a family, and they wanted to have a kid. So the wife they conceive a child, and what's the wife do? Murders the husband, cannibalizes him, eats him up. The police come. She says, "This is natural. This is completely natural." Black widows do this all the time. Praying mantis all the time. Exactly. Natural. How are you gonna accuse me? Another man, he goes, he wants to marry some woman. She's already married. Murders her. Murders the husband. Murders all the kids and has babies with him. They come in natural. Lions do this all the time. Bears, he goes, you can have example after example.
Exactly.
Neglect the kids, leave them.
Exactly.
I'm a bear. What's wrong? We
Exactly.
can this whole nature thing. It seems so well packaged. It seems so innocent, but these arguments never hold up. You just have to look at example. The Quran's always telling you look around you, because you're gonna have counter examples to all this nonsense if you actually reflect on these things.
And they're fake examples, anyways, because even the idea of gay gene and all that stuff, it was all a hoax.
Yes.
So even the basis of everything that's being claimed, it's a false basis.
Yeah. So suicide rate or religious renaissance.
I want to actually touch on Star Wars. Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad.
Yes.
So he actually had a little tidbit about Star Wars and masculinity. So he's saying, in the old movies, essentially, you have the Jedi, right? They're trained since they're children, and they have to master I've never watched Star Wars, by the way. So I'm just speaking from what I heard.
Right? Mash out the
article that you had.
Yeah, a very inexperienced, but I did watch. I watched the Disney reboots or the new ones.
Oh,
okay.
So I didn't watch the
1,
old
2,
school.
and 3. Okay.
Yeah. So he's saying, in the new movies, Rey, the woman the girl character, she just picks up a lightsaber and all of a sudden she's amazing, right? She doesn't go through the process of having to learn, the Force or that kind of thing. And the male character is the one who's like completely unsure of himself, right? The star
Luke Skywalker.
No, not Luke Skywalker.
Antagonist, Rilo.
No. What's
You
his
mean
name?
the same the recent movie?
Yeah, he's the African American character.
Finn.
Finn, like he's completely unsure of himself, right? He's like not really like a strong personality, that kind of thing. So he's like, it's a complete like undoing of what masculinity is, what it means to be a man, what it means to master something.
Even Rey's an ambiguous name.
Rey's like what does it mean? Rey, no, it means king.
Yeah, but to a male, American audience, you don't know what that is. It could be anything. Could have been a guy.
Yeah. And these things are like written on purpose, like so. I think you're right, about the media thing and
pushing it slowly.
Pushing it
subverting
slowly.
the message, but it's subconsciously being absorbed, and then you take the next step and you put the kiss on screen. And then you take the next step, and all of a sudden it's a lesbian couple is the gay Jedis of whatever, and just like that's not. They love each other. What's wrong with that?
Exactly. That's the other thing. The other advice that I have for people who are trying to recalibrate their worldview is to just disconnect yourself from American pop culture, because every song that you're listening to, every movie that you're watching, if you just switch it to a different culture, people who start watching like Ertugrul or a Turkish TV show, or they start watching like Chinese cinema or something like that, their mentality switches, right? So you're gonna absorb whatever is in the worldview of the culture in which you live. Now, if you live here, obviously you're gonna absorb it to some extent. Yeah. But are you gonna amplify it even more? And what's being amplified is selectively amplified, right? Like you said, they're trying to reach 25% capacity in terms of coverage and all that stuff. So if you're amplifying things which are going to mess with your worldview, what do? Just don't amplify that. Find an alternative or cut yourself off from that, and you won't have the same influence or the same effect.
And that's an argument people have against homeschooling. They say, aren't you afraid your kid's going to be isolated? I was like, well, we live in America. You think my kid's somehow going to avoid everything? He has to play on one sports team. I promise you he'll see everything.
Right.
Yeah,
That's all he has to be play with guys for one game. He'll see it all. Like,
Right.
Overnight. It's
Yeah,
not-
and so that argument, that you brought that up, is there's two aspects to that. One is their biggest argument is you're going to be
Sheltering.
antisocial.
yeah.
Right? Antisocial. When they say you're going to be sheltering, right? That's kind of the point, right? You want to filter at least, right? So the thing is, do you want to expose everyone at such a young age to everything? Like, is that what you do when you're teaching someone swimming? You just throw them in the middle. You don't teach them how to swim, and you just throw them in the deep end of the pool. So
Not
you
even
get-
deep end, ocean.
Yeah,
Waves.
ocean, yeah,
That's what they want.
You gotta throw him in a war zone. And be like, you know what? Oh, he's gonna be, he's gonna be
It'll
all
be
right.
just
He's gonna-
fine. I turned out
he's gonna be
all right.
tough,
Toughen
you know,
up,
yeah,
yeah.
toughen up. That's not the way it works, right? So this argument about sheltering, I'm like, what's the problem with sheltering? And you say, well, it's gonna be antisocial. Look at many homeschooled kids, or not just to promote homeschooling, but look at sheltered kids in general. Like, you're not exposing them to pornography. You're not letting them to listen to music. You're not letting her, do whatever. Like, she's not going to understand what's going on in the world. Hold on. First of all,
Do you know what's going on?
yeah. First of all, do you know what's going on in the world, right? Second of all, look, your idea of exposing them means
The
like,
worst aspects of society.
it's you not just you are throwing them with what drug dealers so that they can know that drug dealing exists. Why can't you educate them about the issues? So I'm not saying shelter them that none of these things exist. I'm saying teach them in your own capacity.
I want to expose them. I don't want society to expose them.
Exactly. You expose them. You teach. I have no problem. If the gender curriculum is going to be about teaching, all these different genders and, non-binary gender in kindergarten, then I'll teach my kids in kindergarten myself what the idea of gender is. Tell them my narrative, my perspective, and let them know. By the way, they're saying this in school,
Like
and
how wrong they are.
This is not
How wrong,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? Why would we not do that? So the argument is just like it just makes no sense. As if you want to expose them, okay, put them in South Central in the middle of
All wearing all red.
exactly. And let them be exposed to like the absolute worst parts of society. It's ridiculous, man.
Yeah, the onus is definitely now becoming more on the parents. You really have to be involved. You have to read books.
Yeah.
Right. You gotta connect with those that know. As a community, we definitely have to start getting more interconnected. We can't just be Jama'ah Muslims on Facebook and that kind of thing. No, we really need to. Our own. We got to start doing what the Christians are doing in America, right? I feel like they have way more cohesion.
Evangelical Christians.
Even Mormons. Those guys.
And Mormons. Yeah.
Catholics.
Yeah.
They have huge
The
institutes for these
conservative
things.
ones,
Yeah, they really have whatever they're doing it right, and they're doing it with sincerity.
Because they understand the context. And Muslims are still waking up. They're still not understanding where they are.
I think those guys are coming from the point of view like, oh, we got to reclaim our land, our country, so we got to do everything,
Yeah.
And we're
But
like,
they
we're
know the
just
consequences. They know where this ends up.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should probably end now because all the memory cards are full.
Mashallah. We
That
exceeded
camera's out. That one's out. This one just went out, and I think this one's about to be full.
Okay,
So I think we really,
Alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah, we're gonna cut it. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh Mustafa, for joining us today. It's been a wonderful discussion having you on our longest podcast, setting a record. And inshallah, we hope that anyone who listens benefited from this. Jazakallah khair for listening. And this is Amr Mabruk signing off. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.